Hi, my name is Sarah Lawson, and today I'll be showing you how to make the dumpling. So the dumpling die only has one shape to it, and there's one edge where there's no blade. And this is the edge where you'll be placing your fabric folded in half, the folded edge of the fabric. If you feel more comfortable, you can use a piece of washi tape or painter's tape to designate that area where there's no blade. Otherwise, you'll just fold your fabric in half and place it. So I always like to rough cut my fabric slightly larger than the shape on the die. And I'm going to be using my foam interfacing first. And the foam interfacing is about 1/8 of an inch thick. And so I just like to use it just the one layer folded in half. So I'll place that folded edge right where that blade ends and place a cutting pad right on top. Okay, cutting out your fabric is just as easy. Again, I like to rough cut the fabric slightly larger than the shape on the die. And with quilting cotton, you can cut up to 8 layers of fabric at once. You'll need to cut out 2 of these pieces from exterior fabric, 2 from lining fabric, 2 from foam interfacing, and 2 from shape flex interfacing. After all of your pieces are cut out, you'll be attaching the exterior fabric to the foam interfacing and the lining fabric to the shape flex interfacing using manufacturer instructions. So I've gone ahead and fused that shape flex interfacing to the wrong side of my lining fabric, and I've machine basted the foam interfacing to the wrong side of my exterior fabric. If your foam interfacing happens to be fusible, you'll fuse that to the wrong side of the fabric instead. Once all of your pieces are attached to interfacing, we'll be installing the zipper. So to do this, you'll be folding your zipper in half and making a mark on both halves of the zipper. We'll repeat the same process for all of the fabric pieces. So we'll fold the fabric in half and mark just the top edge, and that will help us install the zipper evenly on both the front and the back of the dumpling pouch. So the zipper will be pinned right sides together with the fabric, so that means the zipper head will be face down. You'll line up that marking that you made on the zipper with the marking that you made on the fabric and pin in place. Okay, you'll be sewing the pinned edge using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and you may find it helpful to unzip the zipper before stitching. You'll be using the zipper foot on your machine. Now that the zipper is sewn to the exterior fabric, we'll be adding one of the lining pieces. The lining will be right sides together with the exterior fabric, and the zipper will be sandwiched in between. That marking that you made in the center will be lined up with the marking that you have on the zipper and on the exterior fabric. We're actually going to flip to the wrong side of the exterior and sew directly on top of the previous stitching. After stitching the lining in place, you'll take your scissors and make small clips about 1/8 of an inch high every 1/2 inch. And what that does is that helps the fabric spread through the curves so that when you press the fabric wrong sides together, it looks nice and crisp. Okay, now it's time to turn the fabric so that they're wrong sides together. Give the fabric a good press with your iron, and then we'll take this back over to the sewing machine and top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric. You'll want to switch out to your regular presser foot and put the zipper foot away for a second, just because I feel like the regular presser foot gives more control for top stitching. For sewing the lining in place, you want to start sewing 1/2 inch up from the end where the zipper is attached, and on the opposite end, you'll stop sewing 1/2 inch before you reach that opposite end. The reason is we need to keep the fabric layers separate on the ends for later on in the instructions. Now that the lining's attached, I'm going to take my scissors and make little 1/8 of an inch high clips about 1/2 inch apart, and what that does is that helps spread the fabrics more smoothly through the curve. Okay, now it's time to turn the fabric so that they're wrong sides together. Give this area surrounding the zipper a good press, and then you'll be top stitching 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric, but remember to start and stop a 1/2 inch away from each end. Now it's time to attach the remaining exterior piece to the other long edge of the zipper. I find it most helpful to zip the zipper back up just for the pinning, just so that the zipper doesn't get twisted. And again, we're going to line up that marking that we made at the top of the exterior with the marking that we made on the zipper. Pin in place. After pinning, you might find it easier to unzip the zipper before stitching. And again, you'll be using the zipper foot and sewing 1/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric. Now it's time to attach the last lining piece, and that lining will go right sides together with the exterior piece that we just attached. And again, match up the markings that you made on the wrong side of the lining with the marking on the zipper. After that lining is pinned in place, we'll be flipping to the wrong side of the exterior and sewing directly on top of the previous stitching. However, just like we did before, we're going to start 1/2 inch in from each end, and we're going to stop a 1/2 inch away from the other end. Okay, just like we did before, we're going to leave 1/8 inch high clips on the curved edge, about every 1/2 inch. Okay, and then we'll turn the fabrics wrong sides together and press. After pressing, we'll again top stitch 1/8 inch away from the edge of the fabric, but we're starting and stopping a 1/2 inch away from each end. Okay, now you can go ahead and zip that zipper back up. And we'll be separating the exterior and the lining fabrics. Okay, we'll be sewing the bottom edges of the dumpling pouch one edge at a time. So we'll start with the exterior, which is attached to the foam, and just go ahead and pin that bottom edge so that the fabrics are right sides together. Okay, we're going to sew that pinned edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that the exterior is sewn, we'll repeat the same process for the lining. First, you want to unzip the zipper at least halfway. Okay, and then we'll be pinning the bottom of the lining right sides together. And we'll be sewing that edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance, except you need to leave at least a 3-inch opening centered on the bottom, and that's for turning right side out. So you'll just be sewing both ends with that opening in the middle. Now we'll be pinching the bottom corners of the pouch so that the fabrics are right sides together, and we'll start with the exterior. So you want to bring that seam at the bottom of the pouch centered across the middle of the zipper. Okay, pin in place. Okay, and we'll be sewing this edge using 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, next we'll be pinching the corner of that lining on the same side of the bag. And we'll actually be pinning that lining to the exterior, so we'll be sewing through both lining and exterior layers. For sewing the lining, instead of using 3/8 inch seam allowance like we did for the exterior, we'll be using 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now that you've pinched the corners of one end with the exterior and lining fabrics, you'll do the same thing on the opposite end, and I've already done so. So both of my ends are secured. And now if you have any zipper overhang, you can go ahead and trim that right now. Okay, now it's time to turn the pouch right side out through that opening that you left in the lining. Okay, and I had my zipper halfway unzipped, so I'm going to go ahead and unzip it the rest of the way to help turn everything right side out. Okay, go ahead and give your dumpling pouch a good press. Once you've pressed your pouch, you just need to close the opening in the lining. So to do so, you'll need to press that opening toward the wrong side by 1/4 inch, and then you can machine stitch that opening closed using an 1/8 inch seam allowance, or you can slip stitch that opening closed by hand. So once your dumpling pouch is finished, it's a quick and easy project. You can fill it with your sewing notions or other tools, and they come together really quickly and make a great gift.